my character as much as I possibly can. So that's one of the reasons why I'll like play League as much as I do, or I'll sit there and I'll like work out as much as I do, is because every time I work out, I view it as like I'm upgrading my strength, right? Every time I play League, I view it as like I'm upgrading my gameplay, my intelligence, and I just want to kind of like max out my stats.
Okay. So, awesome, man. Okay. And you mentioned that you grew up as a fat kid?
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So,
Okay. Actually, quick question. So,
Yeah.
you're sure you're using your headset mic, right?
let me just make sure with Discord. Voice and video.
Dude, this is going to be great. I'm so excited.
Yeah, everything should be good.
Okay.
It says headset mic. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. So, my upbringing was a little bit weird because I grew up on a boat. So, when I was 5, my parents had taken me out of school for 2 years, and we had lived on a boat for 2 years, and we were just kind of like sailing the Caribbean. And it was there that, I mean, I never really viewed my weight as any kind of thing, but I did gain a bit of weight like there. But then it was kind of like when I got back that I was, not that I was like super obese, right? But I remember being in grade school and having people ask like, oh guys, how much do you weigh? And then you'd have a kid that would say 70. And then another kid would be like, oh, I weigh 60, right? And then I would sit there and like lie because I knew that my weight was the only one in the triple digits. So instead of saying 100, I'd sit there and I'd say like, oh yeah, like I'm 90, you know? So my weight was always something that I was like a bit insecure about. And it was like that for a few years until when I was 15. I remember that there was this time where I had just sat there and been like, I want to make a change. Just like for attention or whatever else it might be, like just have a better body in general, have a better view of myself. So that's when I was 15, and I know it was like bad, but at the time I had starved myself for a few months, and then I'd went vegetarian for a few months. And then after that is when I started like my weightlifting journey.
As long as I stand.
So, when you said that you wanted a better, so when you were 15, you decided you want a better view of yourself.
Yep.
What was your view of yourself when you were 15?
Well, it was just one of those things where, like, my high school experience, right? I wasn't the popular kid. Like, people knew me, but they knew me as, like, the weird kid that would ask weird questions, right? So I would never be What?
What kind of questions would you ask?
Oh, well, so for example, right? We'd be in, like, a science class, and then the teacher would talk about, like, let's say how, as you age, your DNA, like, shortens, and that's the reason why, like, people die. So I would ask the kind of question where I'd say, if you were to, like, in-game, make a weapon of mass destruction where you could, like, shorten people's DNA with, like, electromagnetic frequencies, could that be a possible weapon, you know? And they would always, like, look at me kind of weird. But it was just, like, that's the way my mind works. Like, I would always kind of, like, think of the absolute extremes of everything and then try to, like, really figure out stuff.
And how did people respond to you when you were trying to figure out stuff?
They would laugh a lot of the time. Like, they would sit there, they would be like, oh, here he is asking his dumb questions again, and things like that. But my mom was always, like, super supportive of it, because she would always tell me how, like, there was one guy when she was in high school who everyone thought would always ask the dumbest questions, but then he grew up to be, like, a neurosurgeon, making more than all of them. So she was always like, if you're curious about everything, just, like, always ask, always inquire, never, like, hold yourself back, and whatever others might think is dumb, just, like, you, like, if it's pertinent to you, then you understand that, right?
Yeah, okay. So it sounds like your mom was supportive of you asking dumb questions.
Yeah.
And can you tell me a little bit more about your mom?
My mom, very, very driven. She would always, like, she has, because my mom and dad, they're still together, and she, like, worked as a police officer, and even working, like, full-time, she would still always, like, cook meals at home for me and my brother. So I grew up with, like, a very kind of, like, normal family. Like, there was never really any issues, never really any problems. Obviously we'd have, like, our arguments. My mom was always more of, like, the stubborn parent, whereas my dad was more, like, laid back one. So there'd be that, but it was, like, a very normal upbringing.
Okay. And can you tell me a little bit about your dad?
Yeah, so my dad, we have a very close relationship too. I view both my parents as, like, friends. So me and him, like, will watch shows together. He also worked as a police officer for, like, years. That's how he had met my mom. And yeah, he's a very, like, very, as well, like, kind of driven guy. He would always do humanitarian missions, like, in Rwanda or Haiti, as a peacekeeper. So it would be, like, a lot of stuff like that.
Okay. Wow, dude. And how did y'all end up on a boat for 2 years?
So it was because when my dad had met my mom, they had made this, for some reason, I think it was like, my dad had let my mom in on his idea, and then my mom kind of was like, okay, where he had always wanted to like go on an adventure and live on a boat. So when we were in kindergarten, or when I was in kindergarten and my brother was in 2nd grade, that's where my parents said, you know, it's now or never. So my dad took his early retirement. He was in his early 40s. No, I think late 40s, because he turned 50 on the boat. So he was in his late 40s, so he took an early retirement. And then we took out a second mortgage on a house, and we rented it out for that year. And then he bought a boat, and we sailed for 2 years from Florida to Grenada.
And how old were you when that happened?
I was 5.
What was that like for you?
So it was an extreme, like, I mean, it's not the kind of experience you'd ever like have normally at that age, right? So for me, it was very cool because I was able to experience many different cultures. I was able to experience many different like walks of life. Like I would visit some cities or some places, and you know there would be some kids who wouldn't even have shoes, right? And so I was exposed to like a lot of these things and a lot of these like kind of like concepts at that age. But the one thing that it also introduced me to was the sense that everything was like temporary. Because normally when you're a kid, right, you'll have like your friends and then you'll have your school, and every day it's the same kind of routine, the same kind of like environment. But when you're living on a boat, it's a bit different, because what happens is that you'll be there and you'll make a friend with a guy and you'll become best friends with this guy, right? And you'll sit there and he'll be your best friend for like 2 weeks, and then after that you'll never see him again. So you kind of need to come to terms with the fact that not everything is permanent at a very young age. Yeah.
What do you think about this? Temporary.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say life is temporary so much. I would say that everything that you do is temporary. And I kind of like that idea in the sense that it means that you always have the capability for growth or change. But at the same time, the one kind of thing about it, and I guess this is the issue that I have like with relationships, is that it makes you view everything as temporary, so then you always need to be constantly improving. Because if everything's changing and you're staying the same, then everyone else is improving around you, you're not, so then there's a high chance that you get left, if that makes sense.
And yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So it's almost like an endless competition.
Yeah.
Or like a race.
Exactly. Yeah.
And help me understand what happens for the people who win. What do you get?
Well, I mean, ideally for me, right, one day it would be that you have like a family, that you would have kids, right? You'd have a very nice circle around you, stuff like that.
What about League of Legends or physical chatness?
Oh, so like that. Okay, I thought you meant the absolute end goal.
Yeah,
so,
I didn't mean the absolute end goal.
Yeah, so I mean, so like that's the kind of issue with it, is that you can't really become the best, right? So it always keeps you in the state where you always have to constantly improve. You always have to sit there and you always have to improve your physique. You always have to improve like your gameplay. You always have to get better. And there never really is a point where it stops, because it can stop since it's an ever-evolving thing.
Yeah, so that's what kind of confuses me, is like I ask you like what's the point of winning the game of life? And like having a family and having kids and having friends. And then but it sounds like the way you're living your day to day, which I'm not trying to criticize in any way, so please don't think, I'm just trying to understand. It seems like that's not what you're thinking about, or how are those two things tied together?
So I guess the way that I see it is I view it as a thing where now that I'm in my early 20s and I have this like drive, this motivation, this passion, that I can use all of these attributes to really just like sacrifice in the short term and like just put my everything on my grinds and all these things, so that one day I can come to a point where I feel like, okay, if I want to take time off to connect with my family or to maybe pursue something, then I'll be able to, because I already went through that grind.
And what are you sacrificing for?
Well, I mean, so for example, my day-to-day life is I'll wake up, I'll shower, I'll work out, I'll stream for about 12 hours, I'll sit in my chair for a bit, and then I go to sleep. And the only thing that I really do is like, I might respond to like friends, right, on messages, because I always like respond to messages. But I mean, I'm living with my family. I don't really like hang out with them that much. I live in the same city as like my friends. Don't really like meet up with them that often. I don't really like do anything apart from, I guess, grind.
Okay, thank you for explaining what your day-to-day is like. I'm still going to stick with the same question. What are you sacrificing?
Fear is the first of many foes.
I guess that's a good question, because it's not really so much of a sacrifice as it is that you're prioritizing one thing over another, right? So I guess I wouldn't really say that I'm sacrificing anything, because at the end of the day, you're just making a short-term, not necessarily sacrifice, but a short-term investment is what I guess I would call it. And then in the hopes that later on it pays off.
And what kind of payoff are you looking for?
Well, I'm just hoping that like one day I can sit there and be 30, and if I want to take off a few years, right, to like just spend time with like the family that I'll have, right, with my wife, kids, stuff like that I'll be able to, and I'll be in like, I guess, a secure enough position that anything like that would be a possibility.
Okay. Did you like being on a boat with your family for 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, it was cool because so that was like one of the times where I would always kind of use my imagination, right? Because since you don't really have other kids to play with, I'd play with my brother sometimes, but most of the time would just be spent like me making up these like make-believe battles with my toys or stuff like that, or there would be times where me and my brother would play on the GameCube, we'd play video games, stuff like that. Every night, us and our parents, we'd watch like shows on the little TV we had. So it was very like, it made our family very, I guess, tight-knit and very close.
Is that something you want for the family that you're going to have one day?
Yeah.
And if you're 30 years old and you wanted to take a couple years off, what would you want to do?
Just be able to really sit there and I guess like appreciate the moment, because like let's say when you do have kids, right, they're not gonna be in that like young developmental state forever. So I guess being able to spend as much time with them while they're in that state and being able to, I guess, create as many memories as possible would be like a pretty good experience.
Okay. So it sounds like you're prioritizing grinding success so that you'll have freedom to spend time with your children. So it's kind of like it sounds like really freedom is what you're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And that's one of the reasons too I love streaming so much, because when I was in school, the thing that I hated was feeling like I had to study, right? So I just didn't. Or I hated feeling like I had to do homework, so I just didn't. So that's why the cool thing about streaming is that it's one of those things where you can kind of like choose your hours, you can choose like what you want to do. So it gives you the option to really have that freedom, even though you're still like, I guess, working, having this job, right? It gives you, I guess, a little bit of leeway that makes it feel like, okay, I could do what I want when I want.
So I'm hearing that so I'm guessing that you don't feel shackled to the stream, right? You don't feel like you have to stream every day?
No, because, so the thing about me is that, the thing that I love about streaming is that I've always loved the idea of like sharing experiences with others. Like, I was the kind of kid where, let's say when I was younger, me and my dad were to watch Family Guy, right, or something like that. We would sit there, and if my dad would go to the bathroom, I'd pause the show. Because if anything funny happened, and he wasn't there to experience that moment, it's almost like that funny thing never really happened. So the cool thing about streaming is that if I'm able to like share a thought or share an idea or make a cool play, then it's almost like that play is alive because there were other people around to experience it.
Yeah, wow. That's really cool. Are you like what are you like on stream when you play long? Are you like positive and TMA, or are you like a toxic challenger player, or what?
I'm like a raging schizo,
Okay.
I guess. So, yeah. So I guess like my thing is that I'm a bit
Don't look at
psychotic.
chat. Don't look at chat. You guys chat?
Yeah. Okay. So like, what I would say is I'm very like psychotic, because the thing about me is like I'll say crazy things, right?
Okay.
And so I don't really have like a filter when it comes to League, and the thing is that I'll just say like whatever comes to mind. And it's kind of like given me this, I guess, view within the community that I'm just like this like really crazed guy. Like most of my clips, right, that get the most amount of views are the ones where they make fun of me being the most mentally stable League player, because the perception is I'm the most like mentally unstable one.
And what kind of stuff gives them that perception? Like I'm having trouble imagining.
Yeah. So a few days ago, I had a guy who was like playing really badly in my games. So I said that if given the option from God between saving 5.5 billion people or just making it so that this guy never had access to the internet again, he would never cost me a game again, right? So it's just things like that.
So very extreme stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
And as you're saying this, Adantes, are you noticing emotions arise within you?
Like what kind?
Like, are you feeling anything right now?
Shape the future.
Maybe a bit of like nervousness, I guess, but besides that, not really.
Did you feel nervous like 5 minutes ago?
I mean, so like that's the thing about me. So whenever I'm in a new setting, talking to like a new person, or in this case, like interacting with a new streamer who has a new community, I always feel like a little bit nervous because I'm not really like a super outgoing guy. But once I start to feel comfortable, that's when I start to like open up more and feel like a lot better, right? So as like the minutes go by, I feel like less and less nervous. But at the beginning, it was just like a little.
Okay. Yeah, because I think that, you know, and you're okay with being whatever, like, what would you call it? A schizo psych?
Yeah, okay. Look, so
that's okay with you, right?
yes, but okay, I'll explain it. It's because my dad told me this one thing many years ago, where he said, Dantes, at the end of the day, people will forget what you say. They'll forget the things you talk about. They'll forget the promises you make. They'll forget everything. But they'll never forget how you make them feel. So that's why it's just one of those things where I don't necessarily care what my view is in the scene, so long as I can make people laugh. Because I realize at the end of the day, being an entertainer, the number one thing that I have to do, or the number one like obligation that I have, is for my community to entertain. So that's why like one of the biggest things that I got a lot of traction for when I was like a very small streamer was that in the game I play, there are these like 3-foot tall characters, almost like dwarves, and I would always talk about how I wanted to like impregnate or sleep with them. So when I started talking about that, people started like being like, oh, you know, like, that's crazy. But then it's funny because over time, less and less people remember that, and they just remember the more like relevant things. So you're able to make people laugh while also realizing that whatever view they're going to have of you, as long as your content is continually progressing, that view is always ever changing and ever shifting as well.
Okay. So I'm getting the sense that a lot of things that you say have a... I don't get the sense that you're like out of control, and that you're like, because you seem to me as a super kind of like genuine, positive guy, loves your family, pauses Family Guy so your dad doesn't miss a joke, lives on a boat, makes friends with kids in Grenada who don't have shoes.
So that's the thing is, so what had happened actually is when I was a very small streamer, think like maybe 20 to up until I was about 100 viewers, I always was very toxic on stream. And there was this point about, I think it was 2 years ago now, where I was e-dating this girl online for about 5 months. And after 5 months, she decided to break up with me. And one of the reasons why she did was because she said that she felt like the way I act online isn't really who I am. And she was like, I don't know why you pretend to be this like tough guy, why you always like will make threats or like say all these things when that isn't you. And after she had told me that, that's when I started to really take a step back and realize that I was acting in a way that wasn't really me. And ever since then, I've always tried to like stick true to, I guess, like who I am.
Okay. And can you tell me a little bit more about dating and relationships, if you're comfortable talking about that?
Yeah, so my first ever, okay, so in high school, I didn't even so much as like kiss a girl, right? I had my first kiss when I think I was 18 or like 19, something like that. And the first actual relationship that I had was 3 years ago with a catfish. So at the time, my name was Doanel, and this person came to my chat, tier 3 sub, changed their name to Doanella, and pretend to be a girl. So I would get in calls with them for like 6-7 hours a day. We would like message each other for like hours and hours a day. And then I realized after a month of it happening that it was like a dude with a voice changer. So that was a bit shitty because I was like supposed to fly out and everything. I took like the next semester off as well to like take time off to like go and visit that person. Because it was like this weird situation where they were giving me a lot of money, and they also had this other person that was corroborating everything they were saying, so I thought it was real. But then I found out later that that other person corroborating everything was just them on a second account. And like when we'd get in Discord calls as 3 of us, it would be like them with 2 push-to-talk headsets, like talking as 2 different people.
Holy shit, that's sophisticated.
Yeah, so that was 3 years ago. And then 2 years ago.
How did you figure that out?
So it's because I was supposed to leave to go visit them in early September. And in late August, my mom said, okay, look, I don't mind if you go, but I need to like know what's happening because I don't, like if anything ever happens to you, I need to know like who to contact. So she was asking for like phones, parents' names, parents' phones, company names, like everything that could possibly be, I guess, like tied down with this person. And then since she was like a cop at the time, she was able to like verify a few things. So she called me like one day after I gave her all the information, and she said, the phone numbers are burner phones, the addresses are houses for sale, the names don't exist, right? The apartment they said they live at, the people I've never heard of them. So after that, I entered this kind of like depressive cycle, or depressive arc, I guess, for a few months. Because at the time, no one in the community really liked me, and I didn't really have any friends. So then I felt like the one thing that I did have, which was this girl, I didn't have this either anymore. So it just made me very down for like many months until I reapplied to go back into school. in November, and then when I got accepted, I felt like, okay, nice.
An
Like,
enemy has been
I
slain.
actually have like my future again, so it amps my mood up a bit, and then it was a lot better for
Ally
me.
has been slain.
What was it like to talk to someone for like 6 or 7 hours a day?
So it just felt like there was someone that was there that you could always like share things with, you know? And the thing is that I share a lot of the ways I feel or like the ideas I'll have with my stream, but having like an individual person where you sit there and like you share things with them and then they share things with you and you have this like mutual exchange, it's a different kind of feeling. So it felt nice and it felt, I guess, comforting. So that was cool.
So I'm getting the sense that really authentic connections are very important to you.
Fear not.
Yes.
I'm coming.
Yeah, so like that's the thing about me is that nowadays I'm the kind of guy where I could be talking to someone for like 3 months, right? And if they'll tell me a single lie, I'll block them the next day and never look back.
Why?
So, because it's just one of those things where I just can't stand dishonesty. Like, dishonesty is just one of the things where I've been lied to so many times in the past by so many different people and have had my hopes up so many times that now I'm just at a point where if I identify even like a single red flag or anything like that, I'm just willing to immediately sever the connection because I know it's not worth pursuing.
How do you know it's not worth
Well, because if it was worth pursuing, they wouldn't feel the need to lie. Because they'd value, I guess, me having an accurate view of things over me having a perfect view of them. So if they lie to me, it shows that they're completely self-interested in whatever they're doing. And because of that, I just realized that it's not worth it.
Killing spree.
Think for a second.
Yeah.
So you're saying that you'd much rather people be authentic and flawed than perfect and dishonest.
Yeah, because it's just like the whole dishonest thing is really overdone for me. Because, so, like my first ever introduction with any kind of like relationship was the catfish, and then after that it was a few talking stages that I had that ended because again like just like lying about a bunch of things. And then there was the next person I dated, which was 2 years ago, who was like the person I dated for a few months. And then with her, like I was willing to give anything. And after like 5 or 6 months, I realized that she never really viewed it with the same seriousness that I did. So then that was like more months like that was, I guess, like wasted. And then after that, it was more of things where it's like, you know, you talk to a girl for a month and then you realize a month in, oh, she has 5 different Discord accounts where she's appearing offline on the one she's talking to, onto online on the other one, until like 5 different guys the same thing she's telling you, right? So then there was like that, and then my relationship last year was like the nail in the coffin for me, where I'd gotten cheated on, because I had like introduced this girl to like my family, like my parents, grandparents, everyone, and then after she cheated on me, that's when I just said, all right, I'm not doing any online ever again. So then that's when I just kind of like stopped with the whole talking stages online, and since then I've just been kind of like completely focused on like the grind, and like I haven't really had like a person I'll sit there and talk to for hours a day since my ex, like a year ago. I mean, it sucks, but it is what it is, because at the end of the day, the amount of growth that I was able to make and the amount of like the way I was able to, I guess, get to a point now where I can entertain more people and brighten more people's days and also become a better player is worth the trade-off that I'm losing by talking to people that aren't authentic to begin with.
That's one hell of a silver lining.
Yeah.
You do that a lot?
I probably do.
Why?
Because, I mean, I realize that you can never really control like the things that happen to you. Like right now, if a guy were to bust in through my window, right, and chop my head off with an axe, right, like there's nothing I can really do about that. But the cool thing is that I can, I guess, change how I react to it, you know? So that's why it's just like a nice thing that when you're able to control, I guess, like how you react to different situations, you can maximize the amount of, I guess, stuff that you can learn or ways that you can grow from it, even if the situation is not bad. Because I've noticed this thing with like league streamers especially, where there would be like league streamers, right, who they used to be a very high rank, and then after years of sitting there and blaming others for the mistakes, nowadays they're lower rank, and the only person that suffers for it is them, because they'll sit there and now they'll have like lower view counts, they'll have a lower rank, they'll have a lower, I guess, way of people viewing them in the scene. So that's one of the reasons as well why when it comes to League, I try to take as much accountability as possible with my games and my performances, because it's when I take complete accountability for my situation in life that I feel like I've been able to progress the most. And when I get in these like victim mentalities where I feel like people are out to get me, or like, oh, you know, this guy's playing bad, that guy's playing bad, and all that stuff, then my streams suffer, my gameplay suffers, my rank suffers, right? So that's why I always try to keep myself as, at the end of the day, I'm the only one I can control. So because of that, I always try to, I guess, control how I react to every situation.
Control seems very important.
Yeah, sure. I've never been gotten, like, I've gotten, I guess, like, kind of drunk, but never to the point that I, like, lose control of my actions. I've never done drugs or anything like that either. Because, like, control is very important to me, and also, like, self-control is very important. So that's why it's, like, losing control over my body and my own actions and my own mind is the one thing that I would never want, so I stay away from all those kinds of substances.
Where did you learn to fear loss of control?
That's a good question.
Stand ready.
Yes. I'd have to think about it more, but I guess the one thing that I could look at would be maybe like when I lived on the boat, right? Occasionally, the thing about the boat is that it's not like living on land. It's not like if you're in trouble, you can just call someone, or if you're in danger, you can call the police, right? When you're on the boat, it's you against the elements and there's nothing else, right? So when there's a storm, when there's some kind of like material waves like ready to capsize your boat and these kinds of things, it really is that like you can die and you can suffer, right? Like it's not just like there are safety nets, right? So maybe that was the first time that I encountered like an issue with control where it's like you can't really control the elements outside of the elements will impact you. I guess that's the only thing that I could really think of though, because
when you were, do you remember storms on the boat?
Yeah, most of the time I would sleep through them, but I remember that there were times that like my mom would get me and my brother in the like cockpit and we would have to like, we would pray, right? While my dad was out there like steering, and so there were like a few times it was very, very, very serious stuff.
And so, was that scary for you?
Not really, because I've always had this, I mean, I don't think it's about you, but I've always kind of like done myself as immortal, because it's just one of those things where, let's say I die tomorrow, right? I won't be conscious of the fact that I'm dead. Therefore, for every second that I'm alive, I am alive. So I am always immortal in my consciousness, right? So it's one of those things where, since I'm always immortal, I've never really, I guess, like, feared anything like that, because it was just one of those things where, well, I mean, I'll live anyways.
Okay. So I want to point something out to you. I'm like, where did you learn how to fear loss of control? You're like, well, we could die on a boat. And I was like, what was it like to almost die on a boat? And you're like, I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
So that doesn't line up to me. Does that make sense?
No, I get that. I mean, I guess, so that's why it's, because I've been fearing loss of control for a very, very long time now, and I don't know, like, where it was when I was younger.
Where was your loss of control when you were younger?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna, I don't think it's the boat, right? Because, like,
Probably
that
not.
scares normal people, like dying.
Yeah.
But it doesn't scare you.
Your team
Right.
has destroyed a
So
turret.
when did you start getting worried about control? Like, how old were you when you remember? Were you like, it sounds like you weren't scared of it on the boat.
Well, actually, okay, so there was this one thing. So back then, my parents would always watch shows with me and my brother, right? And some of the shows would cover like mature, I guess, content. So one of the shows that we watched was The Unit. And it was a show about, like, I guess these military guys that would go overseas and like fight, and then it would also show like the military wives back home. And I remember that one of the military wives was a cheater, and it always made me very like paranoid. Where at that point I was always thinking like, is my mom cheating, right? And there was this one time where I remember that because she would always do like yoga and stuff like that, and at one point she had run into her room with like the yoga instructor to practice meditations, and I remember grabbing a knife and then telling my mom that I was gonna like cut myself if she didn't open the door because I wanted to make sure she wasn't cheating, and then I just like cut my thumb, but it hurt really bad, so I never did it again.
How do you understand that?
What do you mean?
How do you understand what the hell that was?
Understand what exactly?
Let me think about that question.
Okay.
So you're analytical, you're introspective.
Yeah.
What do you think was going on with you?
Well, I guess I thought that I didn't have any control over opening the door since it was locked. So I did have control over the fact that maybe I could pressure my mom into opening the door if I doubted my own well-being.
Okay. So you were engaging in behaviors to exert something.
Yeah.
How old were you?
5 or 6.
The pre-boat, post-boat?
This was during the boat.
During the boat.
Yeah.
And how did your mom respond?
I don't think she realized. So what happened was she didn't open the door, and then I was just there, and I was like, oh, that cut actually really hurt. So then I got a band-aid.
And do you know what happened to your fear?
I mean, the fear of what? Of someone cheating or like, stuff like that? I mean, it's always been there. Yeah, it's always been there.